friendship. It says here, continuing with the story, I'll relate to it in the third person. His father was surrounded by real friends who proved their friendship when he fell ill many years ago. During one hospital stay, the medical director approached him and remarked, "I've never seen a Holocaust survivor with so many friends." My father was astonished to hear the doctor's comments and explained that he was the sole survivor among 11 siblings and of his large extended family. A mere 3 cousins escaped. Surprised, the doctor explained that seeing the stream of daily visitors and the concern they demonstrated much beyond what he observed among friends, he assumed that they were family members. Okay, then just a quick paragraph here. The importance of friendship. The value of friendship is emphasized throughout Judaic writings. Indeed, there are several synonyms for the word, each connoting a different level or aspect of relations of trust and collaboration. In Pirkei Avot, there are 3 Mishnayos dealing with friendship, employing the term chaver. The first one, Yeshua ben Prachia says, make yourself a teacher, acquire for yourself a friend, and judge every person favorably. The next one is, go and see the right way to which one should cling. That's Rav Eliezer. A good eye. Rav Yoshua says a good friend. And the third one, Rav Eliezer ben Shamua says, let your students' honor be as precious as your own. Let your friends' honor be like the reverence due to your teacher, and let the reverence you have for your teacher be like the reverence due to heaven. Indeed, the famous episode of Hillel the Elder exemplifies the importance of friendship in Judaic thought and life. Gemara in Shabbos relates that both Shammai and Hillel confronted the strange request of a non-Jew demanding that he to be converted as quickly as possible. While Shammai curtly rejected and ejected the non-Jew, Hillel approached him more gently, guiding him in the core principle of the Torah. That which is hateful to you, do not do to your friend. That is the whole Torah, and the rest is commentary. Go and learn. Commentators explain that the source of Hillel's answers is a mitzvah in the Torah. Love your fellow as yourself. Given Hillel's answer, it appears that this is the heart of Judaism, and that it is impossible to start even conceive of being a genuine Jew without comprehending the concept of friend, the love of your fellow.
Okay,
careful reading. 10 seconds. A careful reading of the first Mishnah cited above highlights the language used for the procurement of a friend as opposed to procuring a teacher. When referring to a teacher, the Mishnah uses make for yourself, but for a friend, uses the language acquire. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, thanks, Kevin.
Good. Kev, you know what? I love your Torah. It's not that I don't. We're just under time pressure. I love it. I love you teaching us. I especially love what you're teaching us now. But we've got a bit of a difficulty because we weren't coming past this wall. And what I can see is that Arthur's feeling better and Kevin's feeling better. He's drinking, he's hydrating. So I'm going to deal with this step by step. I spent quite a bit of time yesterday between Mincha and Sluda Shishet before Maariv learning and seeing if I could make it simpler with Hashem's help. I hope it's successful. So let me just state the argument. The Gemara raises a difficulty with the Bryce it just cited because it states one who steals a hybrid and slaughters it pays the 4-fold or 5-fold payment. But why is one liable to the 4-fold or 5-fold payment for the slaughter of a stolen hybrid? Because in essence, the term seh is written in the passage of the 4-fold or 5-fold penalty. So in other words, that's actually the answer. And I'm going to share my screen and then just read it aloud so Arthur doesn't have to look at the screen at all. Okay? Now, if you have a look, Kev, I just want you to read this.
If a man steals an ox or a seh and slaughters it or sells it, he shall pay 5 cattle in place of the ox and 4 sheep in place of the seh.
Correct. So the first thing that you've got to note there is that 4 sheep in the place of a seh means that it didn't say 4 sheep in the place of a sheep. It's used the term se. So se, this is where the question is coming up. We can read that it's based on that pasuk in Shemot chapter 21, verse 37, but there's a difficulty. And that is, it actually, Rava says, if you look at it, it establishes a model and teaches generally, whenever the term se is stated, it's meant only to exclude a hybrid. And how do we know this? If we have a look at Rashi's commentaries in Chulin, the 78th daf, Rava refers to the verse in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 4. And I want Gavin to read it. Just hang on, Gavin. Yeah, read it.
These are the animals that you may eat: an ox, a seah of lambs, and a seah of goats.
Okay, good. So what's happening is when you read a seah of lambs and a seah of goats, it doesn't say a seah of lambs and goats. That's what you've got. That's what you've also got to see. Do you get what I'm saying? It means a seah means basically a offspring of two lambs, and a seah of goats is an offspring of two goats. It uses the plural form. It doesn't say a seah of lambs and goats, which would allow a hybrid of a lamb and a goat. So there we see another piece of evidence as to the fact, if you're looking at this verse in Deuteronomy, that seah is not a hybrid but a thoroughbred. Then also we've got this issue in the Pesach offering, which is actually what Tosfot brings, by the way. On Shemot chapter 12, verse 5. Gavin, carry on reading.
Pesach offering, a seah unblemished, a male within its first year, shall it be for you. From the lambs or from the goats you shall take. The Torah in this verse uses the plural from the lambs and the plural from the goats to indicate that the seah must be the offspring of two lambs or two goats and not a crossbreed of the two.
Correct. So it's the same theme as above. As the above has to talk about chulin, which is kashrut, and at the bottom is the Pesach offering of consecrated animals to Hashem. But it's a little bit different to the pasuk on the top that deals with theft, because there it's including a seah. In every other place, it's saying you can't eat from a seah, okay? You can't sacrifice from a seah. But in the verse of the theft, it just says 4 sheep in the place of a seah, which means there's culpability that you have to pay if you steal and slaughter it, or you steal and sell it. So, Kevin, there is liability with the word seah. So the Gemara is a little bit confused. How come you've got this double message? Do you see what I'm saying? So basically, how do we understand Rava's exposition? Well, it's quite simple, because if you have a look at it, it's different here in the case of theft, because the verse states the superfluous word or to teach us to include the hybrid. Now, I want to show you on that pasuk what I'm talking about. Can you see I've got 4 red circles? Arthur, you don't have to watch. You just have to listen. Do you see the or in Hebrew? There's 2 ors. There's 2 ors in English. Now, the word or is an alternative. You either want this or you want that. It's not and. It doesn't mean both. But what you guys have got to realize is in the pasuk, what it could have done is it could have said ki Yignov, Ish, Shor, Use. In other words, or Verse. So Verse means the shore, the ox, and the se. The reason why you can't have the word Verse is you're not culpable if you steal both an ox and a se. You don't have to steal both in order to have a 5-fold or 4-fold culpability. You learned this in the previous stuff, which meant a 9-fold culpability. If you steal either of those animals and then you slaughter or sell them, there's a culpability. But you can have the vav, Kevin, as the word or instead of va, because it has no vowels, the Torah. Do you get what I'm saying? So what's actually extraneous is the separate word or with an aleph and vav. You could say vase or use without the aleph. So that's what is superfluous, Gavin, not the context of needing either or, because that was a question I asked you the other day that I didn't understand. I figured it out. Or should I say Hashem figured it out for me?
So can you just repeat that? I did hear you. I just want to hear it again just so I'm clear. So you saying, just explain that again, just that why it's not superfluous?
Okay, because, well, it's not superfluous because if I say to you, if a man steals an ox and a seh, it means that if I steal both, I'm culpable, but not if I steal one as opposed to the other. Okay, so you need that or to say either one creates liability. That's number one. So the first.
No, sorry. Why is it? Sorry, I didn't ask the question correctly. Sorry. Why is it superfluous? Sorry. That's
Okay, so that's exactly the right question. In other words, it seems as if it's needed to teach us that lesson, but it's not because. Yeah, it's not needed because you could use you get rid of the aleph and you put the vav like vase or se, because the Chumash, the Torah has no vowels. So you can either have it as a verb, meaning inclusive, in other words, this and that, or you can have ose, like ose shalom bimromav. Do you know what I'm saying? Not in that context.
Are you saying that they could have used less letters and instead of using the or, they could have used the ver instead or something
and
like that?
connected it with the word se to denote.
Yeah, that's actually very clever.
Correct.
Okay.
So
so they're using these ors, the bigger ors, which weren't really needed, which are extra. So there's redundant letters, not redundant words, but redundant letters here.
Well, it is a redundant word in the sense that that wouldn't have to be a separate word because you could connect the vav to the word se and macharo also.
Yes, correct. But I'm saying it's adding extra letters because you'd have to use the vav then, but then you wouldn't use the or, which is two letters. You'd have the one.
Correct.
So that's what I'm trying to say.
So that makes it superfluous, and therefore, what is that superfluous term?
That's very clever. I wouldn't have got that. Well done.
Okay. So it is in fact superfluous, and in fact you've got the same thing. It's superfluous to be an inclusive term, which doesn't appear in the other verses. So let me explain to you what I'm saying, guys. Is what I'm actually saying is the Gemara asks. In the case of theft, it's different because the verse states the superfluous word or to teach us to include the hybrid. So the Gemara asks, but is every superfluous or coming to teach us to include a hybrid? Because it was taught in a brisa, the Torah states with respect to bringing animals as a temple offering. Okay? And let me just show you that pasuk, guys, at which I want Kevin to read it.
Vayikra chapter 22 verse 27 reads, an ox or a lamb or a goat, when it is born, shall remain under its mother for 7 days, and from the 8th day on it shall be acceptable for a fire offering to Hashem.
Exactly. So there's so that's exactly the point, is that we learn another or here. Because you could say an ox, you can say, look, there's two ors, guys, here. Okay, you've got this superfluous or. Let me just show you, Kevin, on the screen. This one, well, it's technically only one superfluous or. Okay, there, because, well, you've got both. I'll tell you why you've got both. Because, Kevin, again, we can have that principle exactly the same. Sure, the kasef or ukasef. In other words, the vav can be part of the word kesef. Does that make sense? Kev,
Which means and.
No. I don't know if you're following my principle of what I'm trying to say. Is that the word or is superfluous because that vav could join onto the next word. It's a conjunction.
To make it and.
Or, because there's no vowels in the Torah. If you use the word or, it's conjunctive in the term as an alternative. It's conjunctive as an and if your voweling is different. But that vav alone is a connecting word. Do you get what I'm saying? It's either an alternative option or an additional option. You don't have to have the separate word or. So it's got two separate words or in this pasuk, and I'll tell you why. Kev, are you following?
Or means it's the alternative. If it's the, it means it's necessary. It's not optional.
No, that's not what I'm saying. All right, let me try again. What I'm saying is the vav could actually mean or and. The is and, it's a joining word.
Yeah.
And or means an alternative. It's either this option or the other option. Okay, but that vav could be joined onto the next word. The very fact that you have an aleph and a vav, that's what's superfluous to teach us a lesson. Okay, and I want to tell you what that lesson is. So the first one is to exclude a hybrid. The second or is to exclude a mutant from a temple sacrifice. Now, a mutant is actually an animal that's actually a thoroughbred, but it just doesn't look like that animal. Do you get what I'm saying? So all I'm saying is these are proofs that the exposition is teaching us something different. So the Gemara's question to us, Kevin, is as follows. Here it seems that every superfluous or is coming to teach us to exclude something, because we're learning this very this very pasuk in Leviticus Vayikra chapter 22 verse 27. Okay, and we learned with regards to consecrations and other things that generally it seems a rule that whenever you have the word or, it excludes a hybrid, especially from sacrifices, the Pesach offering, kashrut, etc. Theft seems an exception, but it's saying, but then surely Rava is coming to show you that that's the general rule. It's an exception. How do we know in the case of theft that we have to include the hybrid? Do you get the question? It seems confusing to the Gemara. How come you got all these different rules? So Rava explains it quite simply. He said, listen, there's no such set rule that every time you see the word or, it's an exposition as an exclusionary term. And it's not an exposition that it's an inclusionary term either. You have to look at the context of the verse. So he's saying, Rava said here in the passage regarding theft, we expound the superfluous or according to the context of the verse. And here in the passage regarding consecrated animals, we expound the superfluous or according to the context of the verse. So exactly what he's saying is that there's no set rules. You've got to look at the context of what you're reading in the Chumash. So he said, look, if you analyze the passage regarding theft, where it's written an ox and a seh, those are two species from which you cannot bring forth a hybrid. I'm going to share my screen again.
But it doesn't mention the hybrid at all there.
I'm going to explain.
Sources. Hybrid's not mentioned at all, those things that you just read.
It technically is, and I'll explain to you why. How do you know? Because seh actually generally means offspring. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Seh generally means offspring. If it said that it wasn't a hybrid, Kevin, it would have replaced the word for sheep in place of a sheep. Do you get what I'm saying? And in the top, it's used. This word says obviously coming to mean more than a sheep, because it could have said if a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters or sells it, he pays 5 cattle in the place of an ox and 4 sheep in the place of a sheep. So it's obviously not just a classical sheep. Does that make sense? So it could only be one or two other options. Number one, it could be an adaptive word to generally connote offspring. That could be it, kosher offspring. Or it could be to include categories such as a lamb and a goat. At which case, how do you know you can't have a hybrid? What's wrong with a hybrid? Because, in principle, Kevin, if you steal something that's mine, why shouldn't you replace it? What difference does it make? You're not eating it. You took it. It's not yours. Why shouldn't you replace it? In other words, even if I've got a non-kosher animal, I can use it as a workhorse.
Why your property?
It's my property. Why are you entitled to not replace it? I'm not sacrificing it. I'm not eating from it. So Rava is saying you've got to look at the context of the verse. So he said, guys, concentrate on the first part of the verse. Now let's look at this. If a man steals an ox or a seh, can you see the screen? So we know that a seh is some sort of sheep. or it's something to do with a sheep. Maybe it's either a full sheep, at which Kevin would have used the word sheep, or it's a sheep mixed with something. Because you're still replacing the sheep with a sheep. If it meant a goat, why don't you replace a goat with a goat? So it's almost some breed of sheep mixed with some other category, which means it's implying that it might not be a fully thoroughbred offspring. Do you get what I'm saying? So he's saying, Kevin, if you look at my screen, he's saying, if you steal an ox or a seh, and you just get that context of the word ox and seh, can they breed children?
No.
Why not?
There's a different gestation period. Different,
Excellent. So as Gavin quite funnily joked, a person can be married to a cow, and a person, you know what I'm saying? But on a real note, an ox has a 9-month gestation period, and a seh has a 5-month gestation period. They can't breed. So therefore, if you just read, if a man steals an ox or a seh, you would think that at the end of the day, there's no problem. Why is there no problem? Because if they can't breed, you can't be talking about a hybrid, because those two animals that you're stealing can't make a hybrid. So that was the whole point of the aleph and the vav. It's superfluous, because you could have said sure useh without the aleph and the vav, not the or. You could have just had the vav next to the word seh. So Gavin, since that or is superfluous, it's coming to teach you a lesson. And that lesson is that you do what the opposite of the default logic is. So the logic is that an ox and seh can't breed, so therefore you exclude a hybrid, and always coming to teach you now you include a hybrid in liability. You get that?
I'm fine.
Okay. Do you get that, Kev?
Not really. Maybe it's because the ox and the seh, if the gestation issue is the main issue, then maybe they shouldn't be mentioned in the same passage there.
No, but they want to, because they're saying, listen, an ox and a seh, your logical deduction is you're not including a hybrid, because an ox and a seh cannot breed, as you said, because the gestation period is different. So your natural conclusion is if anybody steals a hybrid, you don't have to pay the 4 or 5-fold payment if you slaughter or sell it, because an ox and a seh would never produce a hybrid. So in order to correct that and know that if you steal somebody's hybrid, you have to pay for it, there's that word or between shor and seh. Because you could have said shor v'seh or useh. The very fact that or, that's circled in red, is a separate word, is coming to teach you that you have to add a hybrid in terms of liability for theft. Okay? That's what Rav is saying in the context of this verse. Okay? Now, if you look at the other context that Rav is saying is, if you're looking at regarded consecrated animals, where it's written in the verse a lamb and a goat, which are two species, can they bring, Kevin, can they bring about a hybrid, yes or no, a lamb and a goat?
Yes.
Can you go back down there,
to
that section?
Yeah.
They can.
I can't see it.
A seh, a lamb and, well, you've got a lamb and a goat, yeah. And
this is the eating. I thought you were on the next part already, further down.
Consecration. I'm happy with consecration, because we're not technically talking about animals. You're completely right. Gavin's saying exactly what Tosfot is saying. Let's look at consecrated items. That's more accurate than eating. Generally, Gavin, there is a rule that if you can't eat it, you can't consecrate it. But let's just take it at Gavin's literal term, which is like Tosfot, which Gavin is very smart. So it says here, lamb or from the goats. And what does that tell you? Is that they can breed. They can breed. And even if you look at this one, let's look at this classic one for Leviticus, because Rava actually uses the one in Exodus. But even if we took at consecration here, let's just say this one, a lamb or a goat, the second part. Okay, this is the right pasuk. The fact that a lamb and a goat can produce a hybrid, because they can breed, means that you would include a hybrid in consecration. And the extra word or is coming to teach you to exclude a hybrid from consecration. That's what Rav is trying to teach you guys. As far as
I understand you 100%. Just show me where you see the word hybrid there.
So,
where do you see say there? Why is the word say not there?
Okay.
I'm just asking. I'm not
that's good. That's what Tosfot said, that we've got two verses with regards to consecrations. Tosfot said the Pesach offering is the one that he feels Rava uses, because it has exactly Gavin's problem. It uses the word say. Yeah. So in other words, the context of a say is often put in conjunction with the lamb or the goats. Yeah. Do you get what I'm saying? So Gavin,
I can see it there.
Yeah. So often when there's a context, so what he's saying is, if the two animals can breed, you would think to include them in the consecration, but that extra or is coming to tell you to exclude them in the consecration. Okay.
And he's putting it. Is he putting it from this verse? It's Leviticus 22.27, eh?
So
is he using the two? Is he using the two together?
No. Well, the other opinions are saying, Tosfot is saying is using the verse of the Pesach offering. Other commentaries are saying is using the verse from Deuteronomy.
So people are using different verses to try and kind of get the same thing.
Yeah, because it's using a say of lambs. Do you get what I'm saying? So, and a say of goats, which says, can they breed? So the bottom line is that the or is going to teach you opposite to your natural conclusion, Kevin. So when you see theft, you say, well, an ox and a sheep, or a sheep mix, call it a sheep mix. It's can't breed, therefore it's excluded from liability for theft and slaughtering or selling. And that or is coming to tell you, no, it's included from liability. It's not yours. Okay? And the second or is coming to say that it's included in terms of liability of a mutant. It's still not yours. So the or is coming to say opposite than your logical deduction. Where you have the verse on consecration, it says a say of goats and lambs. You can breed lambs and goats. So you'd say you could include the hybrid in terms of consecration, and the extra or is coming to say to you, no, you can't include a hybrid. It's teaching you the opposite of your logical deduction. And Kevin, it's the other or is coming to teach you to exclude a mutant from the consecration also. There's a second or. Okay, just then there's a question that the Gemara asks, and it says basically, but with respect to consecrated animals, it's also stated an ox or a lamb, which are two species from which you cannot bring forth a hybrid, and we should therefore expound the superfluous or to include a hybrid. So let me just explain to you what we're actually saying here. Okay. Am I sharing my screen or not yet anymore?
Not yet.
All right, so
let you know when it.
So this is what we're saying, Kevin, is that the Gemara is asking an opposite question now. It's saying, yeah, but you want to interpret it the way you want to interpret it. But the fact of it is, you can interpret it slightly differently, because you can interpret it at joining. You can join the ox with the lamb, okay, and therefore say they can't breed, and have the or saying, well, then you must include it in consecration. Do you get what I'm saying? Look at the verse here. You could end up saying that an ox and a seh can't breed, so therefore it's excluded from consecration, and that extra or is saying that you can include it in consecration. So it's saying it depends which way you break up the verse. Why do we choose to break it up that way? Because you can actually get the opposite logic, depending where you break up the verse. That's the big question in the Gemara. Look here. Guys, can you see it says sure or kesef?
It's actually keves, same spelling mistake there.
Kebes. Okay, you see,
Yeah, yeah.
Kesev is money. Kebes. Yeah, you see, I don't know Hebrew. Without you, I'd be lost. So sure, Kebes, right? So what it's saying is that, Kevin, you could actually end up saying that the two can't breed, and then that or is coming to show you that since it can't breed and there's no hybrid included in temple offerings, the or is coming to show you it can breed. I mean, you do include a temple offering. So why are we using the analysis of the second part of the lamb and the goat, which can breed, where you would think you could include a hybrid consecration, and the or is showing you can't? Why don't you look at it the other way around and say, well, the shore and the lamb can't breed, so it's excluded from consecration, and the or is telling you can consecrate it. So it's just saying, well, you're interpreting it that way front. You could interpret it the opposite way, come to the opposite conclusion, which is logical, because you can interpret, Kevin, the former part of the verse instead of the latter part of the verse, and have the or teach you opposite to your conclusion. So it's saying, well, what sort of argument is that, right? Because it's saying, but with respect to consecrated animals, it's also stated in ox or lamb, which are two species from which you cannot bring forth a hybrid, and we should therefore expound the superfluous or to include a hybrid. So it says, guys, you could come to the opposite conclusion and think hybrid is included in consecration. And then the Gemara answers, since the superfluous or stated in the latter part of the verse, a lamb or a goat is perforce expounded to exclude, the superfluous or stated in the first part of the verse, an ox or lamb is likewise expounded to exclude. So it's saying, listen, we derive the principle of consistency. The Gemara is saying, I don't buy that, because you could actually have it the opposite way around. So, because since the superfluous or is stated in the first part of the verse, and guys, you see an ox and a lamb can't have a hybrid. And the or is therefore perforce expounded to include a hybrid. And therefore, in the latter part of the verse, a lamb or a goat is likewise expounded to include a hybrid. So it's saying you could do consistency the opposite way around and still draw the wrong conclusion. So this is the answer. It says, the Gemara says, what kind of argument is this? If you want to say that the appearance of the word or is meant to exclude, it's understandable why two exclusions are necessary. For although a hybrid was excluded from one or, we might still think that a mutant is included. Because, guys, a mutant is after all a full-blooded sheep. It just doesn't look like one. So if a hybrid is excluded, you might still think, okay, a mutant doesn't look like it, but it's a proper full-blooded thoroughbred. It just looks ugly. So therefore, it would be included in consecration. So it's therefore necessary to exclude a mutant. But if you want to do it the other way around, and you say that the both appearances of the word or are meant to include a hybrid into a consecration, is it necessary to teach that a mutant is included? So it's saying, listen, it's unnecessary. Because if you want to say it's included for a hybrid, it's obviously if a hybrid's not a full-blooded animal or thoroughbred animal, if that's included, of course you can include a mutant that is a thoroughbred animal. It just doesn't look like it. So it's saying, therefore, it's coming to prove that in this particular case of consecrations, you've got to look at the verse and you can see it's an exclusionary term because by sheer logic. Whereas with theft, you can look at the logic, Kevin, with the or in a different way. It is not your animal to steal, slaughter, or sell. So it doesn't matter if it's a mutant or a hybrid or anything like that. It's not yours to take. So you've got to look at the context of the verse, as Rava says. So having established that Rava's binyan av, which is basically, guys, is the established model, it doesn't come to exclude a hybrid from the fourfold or fivefold payment. But it says, well then, according to what Rava said, the established model teaches us wherever the term says stated, if it's only meant to exclude a hybrid, then why are you teaching it that sort of law? In other words, if the general understanding is, if you look at the context of most verses regarding kashrut, the Pesach offering, and as well as the Torah offering, it seems to exclude a hybrid, except the case of theft, because the context is opposite. So how do we know that you can't just apply it as a general exclusion apart from that one puzzle? Because if you would suggest that it was taught in order to disqualify a hybrid as an offering, why it's written explicitly regarding offerings, an ox or a lamb, which is to exclude a hybrid. In other words, Rava's binyan av is not necessary to teach us to disqualify a hybrid as an offering, because the superfluous or in the clause lamb or goat, guys, stated with respect to offerings already teaches us, as we learned before. Because what we're saying is that you learned it before, if you take a lamb or a goat, they can breed a hybrid. The or is coming to teach you then to exclude a hybrid. So you don't need to know this because we were already taught it. And if you're going to suggest that Rava's binyan av was taught in order to disqualify a hybrid, say, for example, guys, from a Maisa offering, okay, then in that particular case, you don't have a problem simply because the laws of the Maisa offering are derived from the laws of the offerings through a Gezeirah Shabbat with the word tachas. So I'm going to go through that tomorrow. But Kevin, as long as you understand the overlying principles. So there are 4 principles. Principle number 1 is you have to look at the context of the verse. Principle number 2 is the or is coming to tell you genuinely that it's opposite to your intuitive conclusion. Because if the animals can't breed, then a hybrid wouldn't be included in the list. And the only time the or would appear is to teach you the opposite, it would be included in the list. If the animals can breed, then you would include a hybrid in the list. But if an or appears, it's coming to teach you that it will be excluded from the list. So you have to look at the context of the verse and if there's an or. In these cases, with regards to consecrations, it's excluded in the list because you could say, do we interpret the first part of the brisa or the second part of the brisa or pasuk? We have to look at it and say, well, if you're including both, it doesn't teach you anything. The reason why you're excluding a hybrid is you still might think a mutant's allowed. But the second exclusion is to exclude a mutant because even though it's a thoroughbred, it doesn't look like one. So it's not good enough for consecration. Okay. All right, guys, we're done. I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, well done. Thank you, Damon.
Pleasure. All right. So we're moving on already, which is great. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. See you shortly, man.